There we go. Okay, I'd like to open up the planning board meeting.
Here.
It's been a while since we've met, it seems like, so we're kind of getting back in the swing of things. So welcome everybody to the City of Littleton Planning Board. And we might as well just kick it right off with a roll call.
Present.
Here.
Board Member Green.
Here.
Here.
Present. Sorry.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. I think we'll go ahead and move LaDonna up to Karina's seat. You'll have to arm wrestle with her.
Have it.
Okay, for the first item on the agenda, we have the minutes from March 10th, 2014. Nope, that's the agenda for tonight. From January 27th, 2014, we have the minutes. Are there any changes, edits, deletions from anybody on the board?
Yeah, I got a couple of changes. Could you change line 42? There's on line 42 from a lot to some, and line 403. I think it's 403. From mountain lions to coyotes.
From elephants to coyotes.
Maybe next time I'll wait 5 minutes.
Good catch. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other changes, comments?
Good luck tonight.
Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second? Cast your vote. Okay, minutes pass. Okay, at this point, we have scheduled, which we have none, or unscheduled appearances. If anyone would like to address the board regarding a topic unrelated to what we're going to hear in the public hearing, welcome to approach the bench. Pam? And we'll give you 4 minutes, or, yeah.
Thanks for that. Welcome back, Planning Board, and I'm still Pam Chadbourne at Nevada and Crestline in District 1. So you just approved the minutes from January 27th, which I spoke at. And I simply wanted to say those are great minutes from my point of view. What I said was in there. The things that I really cared about are in there. And I like that. That's great. It makes me feel acknowledged as a citizen. It provides a searchable record for other people to look at. So let me commend everyone on those minutes. Thank you very much. So what I'm talking about tonight is the planning board process for public engagement. And I'm using this to remind myself that we all work for the greater good of the city and for behavior that reflects respect for ourselves and each other. And I'm going to talk about getting information for tonight's meeting. I'm not going to talk about the content of the public hearing, but there is a public hearing tonight. And on January 27th, I talked about not being able to find minutes online that I could respond to in time for the next meeting. There was a planning board meeting scheduled for February 6th. It was announced on the website. You all may have gotten packets, as far as I know. And it said that there would be a meeting on February 10th. and I called the city for a copy of the ordinance change that was proposed for that meeting. Apparently on Friday, the planning board meeting was canceled, probably for interviews by the city council for boards and commissions. So, but I was still interested in the ordinance. It was already on the agenda. I called to follow up on my request for a copy. On the 13th, I got voicemail from Becky Fye, who said she's from the city attorney's office, and she said, you called about the tree ordinance. It is still in work product format, and we can't release it at this time. When it does get to the point, we will put it into the packet, and it will be available. So the problem was, again, as I mentioned in January, there's no links in the online agenda to the packet for tonight or the materials for tonight. I called, and I got a copy of one of the items for the public hearing. I didn't get either the staff reports or the other section of what's included in there. So that's in the way of describing what to me is a problem. I have a suggested public process, and that's that staff finishes proposed document changes and their packet, and that those are posted online and delivered to the planning board. The public has 2 weeks to evaluate the impact of the change. And what that means is we need to read the material. There's a staff point of contact, and we can call them with questions. We can notify our neighbors and friends who also might be impacted, and we can evaluate the impact on us. And the staff and the planning board perhaps could hold public information and Q&A sessions. And the planning board would choose that public hearings would not be held unless citizens have at least 2 weeks to learn about the change, make and resolve inquiries with a point of contact, evaluate the impacts so that we can make meaningful, concise comments at our limited time during the public hearing. And my questions are, what is the planning board's public engagement intent? How will you implement and enforce it? You have the opportunity to be a major interface between the city and the public. And increased public engagement can only improve what happens here. And you will learn more careabouts from all of us. So, and I think you have the latitude to set the schedule and the requirements, the level of which you want to see staff work done. So I encourage you to do that. Thanks very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to talk to the board? Okay, moving on to our first public hearing. We have an ordinance of the City of Littleton, Colorado, amending Chapter 4, Title 8 of the City Code concerning trees and shrubs. And staff, are you going to present the ordinance?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll do a quick presentation. I'd also like to note that we have Dave Flagg, who has been responsible for implementing what is really the tree ordinance in Title 8. But one thing I do want to point out to the board is, you know, you're charged with making a recommendation on changes to Title 10, which is the zoning code. So it's really only a small portion of the proposed ordinance. So that's what I'd kind of like to focus on, but I understand you have a great deal of intellectual curiosity and will certainly ask questions about the whole ordinance. And I think Dave would be a good person to answer those questions. So what we did is we provided a highlighted section. It's Section 4 of the draft ordinance. To change the wording to read, now I'm just going to go ahead and read it verbatim, that the owner or developer shall, to the extent possible, incorporate existing healthy mature trees into the landscape design. Existing trees and other plants in reasonably healthy condition may be removed only if the owner or developer has satisfactorily demonstrated to the city that site design restrictions necessitate their removal. An evaluation of the existing landscaping proposed to be removed may be required. If development requires removal of healthy mature trees, the owner or developer shall, to the extent possible, install new trees of not less than the minimum caliper size specified in 10-5-8E of the zoning code of this chapter, and generally consistent with the number of those removed. And what this language replaces is primarily we have a standard in there that if you have existing trees on a site, it might be a green site or it might be a redevelopment site, and you have to, because of the reuse of the property, have to take out some of the existing trees. You're mandated by our code to strictly provide trees back at a 2-to-1 ratio. What staff has struggled with in a few cases is there's other considerations for the number of trees. The size of the site, will the trees fit on the property? I think Dave would mention to you, if you get too much of a density of trees, their chance of survival goes down, so perhaps just putting a total maximum number of trees on based on what was there perhaps isn't the best criteria to use in landscaping a site. And some of the other things you might take into account is land uses, the types of trees that are going in, and the proper spacing of the trees. We also have additional standards that come on top of this. We require a minimum of, I believe, 5% of a parking lot to be landscaped, and then there's also minimum standards for the site as well. So when you add all these requirements together, you really almost end up with an unutilized, a site that's difficult to utilize. So that's why we are recommending that this portion of the code be opened up and allow a little bit more flexibility and design discretion on the point of staff to make a good landscape or site design. So that's really the portion of this section. Then there's also standards in here as far as when you can remove a diseased tree and what your license requirements are for somebody to remove those trees. Again, sections that don't affect the zoning code, and the council will, I believe next week, will consider the whole ordinance as well. But again, we're asking you to weigh in on that section 4 of the code. Staff thinks it's a good idea to provide a bit more flexibility versus a strict standard of 2-to-1 trees. If you take some out, that's what you have to replace. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or again, we have Dave Flagg here as well. That's really an expert on this particular ordinance. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So before we have questions, are we voting on this? I mean, just explain.
Yes, you're voting on specifically a recommendation on that section 4.
Okay. Okay. So open it up to the board for discussion. Ask questions of both Glenn and Dave.
I want to clarify this, though. We're just approving or voting on this section 4, which begins on line 22 and continues through. It's not just this yellow highlighted area.
All of chapter 4 as amended, correct?
All of section 4, the only amendments are shown in the highlighted area. The rest are as it's written, and we're really not amending.
Although we see things being crossed out, et cetera, in
Right.
other areas.
Correct. The strikeouts and the caps is what's being taken out and put back
Okay.
in.
So we are voting on everything, including what's being stricken, what's being added because of caps in other section, as well as the highlighted area in section 4?
Right, I'm sorry. There is actually a section I see where we're taking out the word arborist on the following page,
Section
line
3
16.
and 4. 3 is where you change the disease and infectious definition.
Right, but only section 4 deals with what's in chapter 10, which is the
Okay.
zoning code.
I think simply all I'm just trying to clarify is there's a 5-page document here. Throughout the document, there's strikeouts, there's caps. It's not just that highlighted paragraph you read us.
Correct,
Okay.
But that portion is not under our purview.
correct.
Who is
The only
voting on
only
that?
the highlighted portion is the only thing that's under Title 10,
Correct.
and that's the only portion that we're,
Who's voting on the other section?
The
Or
city
other parts?
council.
Just the city council?
is just the highlighted section. We don't need to worry about the other strikeouts, changes, capitals.
Oh, so the section 3, chapter 4 is title 8, which is not under our
Correct.
jurisdiction. Okay. So we just have this for
That makes
our
it a lot
information?
easier.
For your information, to
Okay.
see the context of what this amendment is.
Okay.
I'll never do that again. I'm
So
sorry,
this-
I've confused
I
you.
was up all night.
I'm sorry.
So this stapled document that has the ordinance on the front, we are only concerned with the last 2 pages, section 4, 10-5-7, landscape design criteria, E, paragraph 1. Any questions?
I like it.
Is there any difference between what's printed out here and what you sent us?
No.
How did this come about?
Okay.
I mean,
Go ahead, Dave.
see why, kind of the need for the change, but what was the impetus behind it? I mean, what?
I think
Brought it
what
to the
we've
forefront.
found over time is, for instance, there is a particular green site that has a lot of existing trees, a lot of cottonwoods on the site. It's to be developed for retail uses. So applying this 2-to-1 standard almost creates a forest on that particular site. I think we've probably dealt with this over time and perhaps worked around it, but I think we realized that there were other changes that need to be made, and this popped up as well.
Okay, so is there a possibility for, instead of reducing the number of trees, having, I think a lot of, there's a lot of push to maintain carbon footprint, and reducing the number of trees would, increase the carbon in the atmosphere or whatever. Is there any possibility of having them plant trees off-site or use shrubs instead of trees, maintain a level green, amount of greenery, rather than having to use trees necessarily? And then the other thing would be, native plants versus non-native plants, because there's a lot of invasive species out there as well.
Certainly, that's an option. I think and Dave can speak to this, I think we've tried to get away from dictating shrubs and primarily focusing on trees, which provide the shade and certainly help the most with our carbon footprint. But certainly, I guess that's an option the board can discuss, is that I think what you're saying is keep the 2-to-1, but perhaps some of the trees go into a bank that maybe is used somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean,
it
it could run the gamut, I guess. You could either have the developer directly plant trees elsewhere where they're needed, in parks or somewhere else, or along the Platte, or put up money so other areas can be improved, wetlands or some other green areas that are not on their site. I mean, I don't know if that's even possible to dictate, but.
I think it's possible.
Okay.
I was hoping I wouldn't have to come up here. I'm David Flagg. Among other things, I'm the city arborist with a capital A, soon to be city arborist with a small a, after this goes through. First of all, all of the development parcels in the city, when they do a site development plan, have to do a landscape plan that comes up and goes through. We don't have specific quantity requirements other than the tree replacements and other than 1 tree for every 40 feet of frontage. However, that's actually a good thing, because as long as you have someone who's relatively competent, I'm including myself in that, we make people do a reasoned, good landscape plan that has the correct amount of trees that are in there. If they try to sneak in with not enough trees, I can just say you need more trees over here, you need more trees over here. If it's overplanted, we'd obviously scale back. So in most cases, you're going to get a lot more trees than someone's taken out. Littleton's Commons East is a good example. They're putting back about 4 times as many trees as they're taking out when they're going to build those apartments. Another good example would be the King Supers, which is under redevelopment right now on Littleton Boulevard. They weren't removing that many trees, but it was pretty hard to actually find spots to put them back after they got done. So where we would have had a little leeway there, well, say, for instance, they're required to put back 19 trees, a reasonable thing might have been 15 or 16. This would have allowed me to back off a little bit and still meet the code. So that's pretty much the way that works. And we really look at every site as being unique. We discuss it in staff. We discuss it with the developer and stuff. And I don't think we're particularly onerous in terms of requiring more trees than they should put in. And I think we're definitely not lenient in terms of letting people get away with not planting what would be considered the correct amount of trees. So it actually has worked out pretty well so far. Specifically, the reason that this is up here is the original landscape code was passed in 91 or 92, which required 2 2-inch trees for everything that was removed. That's in Chapter 10, the part that you're changing right now. In 1994, they came in with Chapter 8, Title 4, Chapter 8, the tree code, and it specifically was addressing tree removal and putting in specific things. At that point, that code required 1 3-inch tree for every tree that's been taken out. So for almost 20 years, 2 2s or 1 3. A lot of times I sort of split the difference. I'd let them put in 1 2.5-inch tree, and also the 3-inch. So that's why we're amending the code specifically to make sure that those 2 things correspond correctly in terms of the quantity, giving us a little bit of leeway in terms of the quantity, and allowing us to consider the fact that if something has been zoned for a future commercial site and it's completely covered with trees, let us to go in and have a little bit of leeway on that without a site development plan being in place.
Are we still requiring that the trees along the frontage, even with this change?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you came in and you had a site, you were redeveloping a site or starting all over with a shopping center or something, and you were going to remove, let's say, 20 trees, we would come back out, you'd bring in a new landscape plan, which is required as part of the SDP. You'd put in X number of trees. You're required essentially to have 1 street tree for every 40 feet of frontage. But you're also on the interior of the site also going to have trees and stuff too. So in general, usually you're going to have more than what you took out. But let's say it's a small site or something like that, and maybe there really is only room for 14 or 15 trees, 16, 18. That would allow us to go ahead and put those in there. In some cases, we can also negotiate and maybe have them put in some taller trees, some evergreens or something like that to also mitigate. But those are all things we talk to developers about when they come in. So this basically makes sure that the code, in terms of the quantity required, gives us a little bit of leeway, and in terms of the size required, make sure that the two corresponding parts they actually match up in those 2 chapters in the code. And you have purview over Chapter 10. So,
Dave, can you give an example of where it did not work? Can you think of any situation where it did not work?
okay, it was originally something electric. It's over across the street from Lowe's, directly west of Lowe's, and behind the auto parts store on Bellevue. There's a big office building in there that contains an electrical contractor. When they came in originally, that site was covered with broken concrete and a lot of volunteer cottonwoods, like 41 or 43 trees. They came in, it's zoned industrial. They're required to put in 10% open space, 10%, so the rest of the site's covered by the building. In that case, actually, what we did is we allowed them, we worked out a deal, they planted the trees and the river, on public property on the river adjacent to the site. We actually worked something out so they could do it. Had we not done that, though, you can drive by that site and look at it and see there isn't room for 41 trees in there. We would add a tree every 4 square feet or something if we did that. So that's an example of an area really. And really those extremes don't come up that often, but this does give us a little bit of leeway other than just saying the code says put in 40 new trees.
Let me take you through a theoretical project, which really isn't theoretical. Happened 12, 13 years ago. I was in front of the beloved DRC with this case. A client has a building, the architect designs an addition to where he thinks is the best side of the building to add the addition. Does the city have the right to say, no, the addition can't go there because we want to save tree X, and force the client to move the addition? Does the city have that right, or is the developer, the owner of the building, have the right to put the addition where he would like to? That's my first question.
There is leeway in here. We use the phrase where no reasonable alternative exists. So in most cases, if you're going in, you got to put in an 800 square foot addition. It's got to be on this end of the building. We might even ask you, show me a sketch where you're saving the tree. You come in with a sketch, it's a goofy little thing. Obviously, it's not reasonable. So technically, yes, but this calls for reasoning and whatever that's in there, and I think we've exercised that where it goes through. So
You used the word reasonable. That could be wiggled on both sides. I guess that word could be. So it could be a controversy,
Right.
maybe sometimes.
And they can appeal that to the way this is written. They can appeal to the Board of Adjustment if they think we're being, or whoever's.
Okay. I do like giving you the leeway, because in this particular case, the client had, the building wasn't built, but the client in the plan had planted hundreds of shrubs and trees on this former site, and was taking out 2 or 3 trees, and you were forcing him to put in 6 trees, and he was just going, what? You know, I took this former, 7-Eleven site, and I'd planted the hell out of it, and all of a sudden you're making me put new trees in where I've already planted a lot of trees. In that case, the leeway would have been nice to, for you to.
Well, that's what we're trying to address and fix
Exactly.
with this, so.
So he would have been forced to put some trees out front where it would have blocked the view of clients seeing his building and seeing his product. And he left DRC quite irate at the whole situation. So you having the leeway is a good thing, I think.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the appeal process? So because there is a lot of subjectivity, to the extent possible, satisfactorily demonstrated, it's very subjective on the decision of how you'll allow them to waiver from what the requirement, what's acceptable or not acceptable. What is the appeal process for the developer to come back to the city and say, no, that's completely unreasonable?
Usually there's a series of discussions in what used to be Development Review Committee. It's basically among staff now and department heads, and we talk about that. We talk about it with the developer. I've been here since 1991. We've never had an appeal. So I think we've got a good track record of working with people, and this actually gives us more leeway to work with that. So, and the appeal process is really pretty easy. They appeal to the Board of Adjustment. They go in, they have one hearing, and that's the end of it. So if it ever did happen, they would come in, present their case, we would present our case. And
I would expect in the past, now looking at it from a citizen perspective, in the past, I would think citizens have always supported this because, again, one of the assets of Littleton is we have these beautiful trees, mature landscape, etc. We're kind of allowing a little bit more leeway and maybe an opportunity to have less of that. Have you gotten any kind of feedback from citizens, either in the past, based on past decisions, or anything related to this now?
most of the, I guess you'd call it feedback that I get concerns, I'd say probably 70 or 80% of it concerns whenever there's a chainsaw that goes off anywhere near the Highline Canal. I get phone calls from everybody that's along there.
Okay.
We have a pretty good working relationship with Denver Water because of that. All their employees know exactly what our code is and what our law is. The other thing is sometimes I have people that call and say, my neighbor is cutting down, in some cases, a beautiful radiant crab apple that the city gave them, but it's on their property. I have no authority over that, and they just cut it down. I don't agree that it's correct or whatever. I'll try to reason with them, tell them what the value of the tree is. The trees are, obviously larger trees are much more valuable to our community, and if you're cutting down 30 and 40-inch caliber mature shade trees and putting back 2-inch shade trees, there's a huge economic losses all the way across the board. But I think this really does a pretty good job of trying to address that, at least in the best way that we can. And it may take 20 or 30 years for that canopy to come back, but I don't really know what a better alternative would be. You can't plant 40-inch trees.
And one last question. So who else is involved in this decision? So was it a committee, or who are the individuals that go through this? So it probably starts with you, but who else gets involved along the way?
I generally administer this myself. I'll call and talk to the people. If there's any sort of disagreement or whatever, in most cases, I will talk to Charlie Bloston, who's the Public Works Director, or I'll talk to Glenn, or we'll sit around and we'll talk about it in staff when we go through. And that's how we kind of work things out. There's a give and take that occurs in almost all these situations. If it's an individual, if it's a church or a condominium association or something like that, it usually kind of goes through the same process. And if they really don't agree with what I'm saying, they can appeal to the Board of Appeals, but that has not happened.
Okay.
Gary?
Question, where is our arborist going? Is Michael Penny getting his arborist certification, or is the city manager designee now? What are we doing with our arborist? Which is you, correct?
Just we're systematically removing, I guess, the office of the arborist with a capital A.
Okay, that's all I
And
meant.
the arborist has always been appointed by the city manager. So essentially, instead of specifically appointing an arborist with a capital A, the city manager will appoint the person that's best.
So we'll still have someone certified that knows something about trees?
I would hope so. I'm a certified arborist. I'm also a licensed landscape architect.
Okay.
Even if you're small a, you're still an arborist?
I'm still a certified arborist with a capital A. I've got certifications in the back of my thing, so that's really fine. And I understand completely, because in a different situation in 20 years from now, it's possible that he's going to tell someone else to fulfill these duties. Maybe they don't have somebody who has a range of skills or whatever that's specifically suited for that, and maybe it ends up being the traffic engineer or something 20 years down the road.
Right, which doesn't
Yeah.
feel as good. And when I just have a comment more, I guess for the record, David was talking about, still the idea of you're removing 2 trees and you should plant 4, but we only have room for 1. Maybe the money that would have been used to plant those trees can go into a fund or something to help because it appears that in Section 3 we're getting rid of some of the city's funding for that. So it was more of a comment just to be on the record.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so I need to open it up to public comment. So at this point, if there's anyone who'd like to address the board regarding this ordinance change, I'm opening the public hearing. Okay.
So no specific comments, since I didn't have much time to look at this, but I'm impressed by the items that you brought up. I think they're very good issues. I encourage you to pursue the idea of putting money for replacement trees into a fund. However, the question is, do you have enough time to figure out what that is tonight to get the information that would be valuable? And is the public engaged with the decision? My request to you is to table this matter to a later date. Items of public policy should take time to decide. And I would suggest that on this matter, engaging the public, informing the public about the issues at this stage is hugely valuable to the city council process. If you don't, it will be a laborious and perhaps contentious process. Tons of us have right-of-way area. I'm quite sure almost none of us know that this is happening. And so I encourage you to table it to a later date, ask staff to set up a public information session to inform us about what's going on. And I realize that that doesn't perhaps directly relate to what you're voting on apparently tonight, but I think it would hugely benefit the city and the public. So I'd like to propose that idea. And also partly for what I brought up, which is simply the fact that this information wasn't available to the public except by rather extraordinary means. And the 8-10 minute discussion at the beginning here about what are we voting on, I think reflects that this issue isn't clear. So if it's not clear to you, how can it be clear to us? Staff really needs to step up a little bit more to make what's happening here clearer. I think I'm directing this at Glenn because Glenn's comments were about this. It can be made much clearer about what the matter of consideration is and then how we engage the public with that. And I say we, but really it's up to you. I have a corner property, has a bunch of old trees. I really, really care about what you guys do here. When I drive on Cayley or Littleton Boulevard or any of those streets, there's a ton of us who care about what happens with this ordinance. Please consider having some kind of public engagement session, having staff do that. I think you have the latitude to do that. And so table to a later date. Give us a chance to be informed, ask staff to bring something to us, tell us what's going on. And that's what I'd like to ask for. I'm going to say, too, that I trust Dave, but I don't trust the city manager to make these decisions. Dave is a certified arborist with a capital A and a landscape guy. He knows this, but the changes in here, which I guess you guys don't get to vote on, are all about the city manager making decisions about this, and I am totally opposed to that. Again, a purpose of this public engagement session would be to help us understand what's going on there as well. So, in one last comment, small trees, when they're planted, have a much higher survival rate. The larger tree you dictate, the more statistically are going to die. And then, by fiat, you have the result of fewer trees. So this is worth a little consideration. Really appreciate the issues you brought up. Thank you for hearing what I'm asking for. Thanks for caring about this.
Thank you. Excuse me. Is there anyone else? Okay.
Thank you. I'm Carol Bresack, and I live in the 4th District. I was online trying to download the information for tonight's meeting. As Pam has stated very clearly, it wasn't available, so I came down here to try to read this. So my comments are very random and probably don't even make a lot of sense because I haven't had any time to really study this. I think the first question I have is, when they talk about the owner, are they talking about me as an owner in the city of Littleton, or are they talking about an owner of a property that's to be redeveloped or developed? It kind of makes me think twice about planting trees or removing trees. I'm hoping it doesn't apply to me. I live on Lee's Gulch. South Suburban Parks runs behind my house. They maintain it. There was a summer when they came in and removed a stand of Russian olive trees, and it provided a real barrier for us in our backyard. My husband talked to them, and they ended up actually moving those trees over, putting some dirt on them. They did I think it was Denver Water that came through and did a project. And then they replanted the Russian olives, only to have the Russian olives removed a few years later because they were designated as nuisance trees. And they certainly didn't plant 2 for every one that they removed. So I'm wondering how this impacts South Suburban. Do they operate under this code or not? I just know that what I've seen in the back, when they moved that stand of Russian olive trees, they put some beautiful cherry trees behind our house. I think all of them, but maybe 1 or 2 have survived, and I'm pleased with what they did, but it didn't comport with what I'm reading here. I think that the issue for me tonight, besides not understanding this, you obviously didn't understand what you were voting on, with the explanation that was given by Glenn and by Mr. Flagg, I think I'm a little more comfortable with it. There are other elements of this zoning requirement that you have not discussed. There has been no recommended changes, but perhaps there's something there that you might want to change. But back to the process. The public wants an open process. They want open government. And this is not the first time, and I wish it would be the last time, that we would have to come to some of our public meetings and let you know that the information wasn't available to us. And Pam's got more information than I do, and she says that the document was a work in progress when she had requested, but yet this ordinance says it's got the date of February 24th in here, so my guess is, it says the planning board considered the amendments to Title 10 at the public hearing held on February 24th. So obviously this document was available before tonight, and there's no reason for it not to have been available on the website. And as public servants, I would hope, but I doubt that it would happen, is that you would send a strong message to the staff that you will not consider any ordinance or any action unless it's been submitted to the public in a timely fashion, so that we can come before you and comment in a way that's relevant. And I just think that's the least that we can ask. And if you don't take a stand, then my guess is the practice will continue, because there's no consequence for not informing the public. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, I close the public hearing and open it up to discussion from the board. Any further questions for staff? Or go ahead, Mark.
Yes. Questions brought up by some of the citizens. What is, quote, owner? Let's start with residential owner. Does this ordinance cover anything in a residential district?
If that owner is redeveloping their property to a use that is then requires a site development plan, then this would kick in.
But if it's a R1 area, it stays R1. There's a tree they don't particularly like because it casts shade over their sunroom. They can cut that tree down, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Under the former ordinance and the way it is proposed, right?
Okay. Second question, South Suburban, are they subject to these regulations?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just to confirm, the only thing we're actually voting on is the highlighted section in the section 4, paragraph 10.5.7, line 29 through 37.
It's that section 4 of which the only substantial change is what's highlighted. I did notice that in the following page there is a arborist is stricken on line 16. That's the only other change.
Okay.
But that change, am I right, that change would be someone else making the change and just making this consistent with that? We wouldn't be voting on the arborist issue?
I'm sorry, Ed, I missed that.
Well, you're talking about making changes in section 4, so I'm just confirming the reason that's highlighted and maybe the arborist isn't highlighted is because that's a change to other parts of the code that would be made consistent with that arborist decision, but it's not on our plate.
Correct.
Ed, can you tuck in the mic, because it's really hard to hear you up here? Thank you.
But this brings up a point, because if we make that change there, that changes throughout this whole document in other places. So we may decide to make that change there, and somebody else, City Council, may decide to call it something different and all the other. There's just an inconsistency there.
Ours is just a recommendation anyway, right?
Right.
So-
And just to be clear, you're taking out the arborist responsibility and just making it broadly the city manager or the city's responsibility, and whoever the city manager designates, which could include an arborist, but not necessarily.
That's right.
But it is in accordance with the landscape manual, so whatever is dictated by the landscape manual still has to be enforced by whatever authority in the city that's going to do it.
Another question.
Mark?
Shrubs have been jettisoned from the document. Can you give me a quick answer as to why shrubs don't have the same standing as trees, so to speak?
Okay, I'll give you a quick sort of informal history. 1994, the tree removal portions were more or less specifically addressed because the Denver Water used to come along the Highline Canal with a huge machine, and basically everything they could reach, they would desecrate, big stands of wild plum and chokecherry and whatever. So from my understanding, I didn't participate in this, but that was specifically put in there to prohibit them from doing that. In essence, that's unenforceable in other areas because somebody has a shopping center in South Park or something like that that has one Tammy juniper, that's going to be bigger than 10 by 10. They're going to go in and take it out. They're usually not going to ask our permission. Usually they're going to have a landscape plan. In some cases they'll call me and they'll take it out and put something else back in there. But really, it's a pretty much unenforceable. Even if we got the word out to everybody, I don't think people are going to bring in a permit to do that. So that's why that's being eliminated.
One question.
Sure.
Could you do your job, and maybe this is unfair to ask because you can't not be yourself, but could you do your job well if you weren't a certified arborist? Would your job be a lot harder?
Yes, I would say it definitely would be. I think it's really important. You know, to me, I mean, I was educated as a landscape architect and an environmental planner, but I mean, trees are sort of my passion, so I take that more seriously than other things. I think when you do a landscape plan, the trees are really the most important thing. They're the thing that's going to be there if it's done correctly. In 50 years, the hardscape will have been redone 3 or 4 times, the shrubs 4 or 5 times, the perennials 10 times. So to me, the trees are really the most important thing that goes in there. You know, and selfishly, I think that's the most important part of it. So I think it is pretty important that you have somebody that understands trees and knows what's going in. I get a lot of phone calls from people that, you know, Siberian elms, there isn't a Siberian elm in the city that doesn't have 10% dead branches, and the stuff breaks out and they don't look very good and they get elm leaf minor and stuff. But they are a tree. They do provide benefits to the city. They're not aesthetically great, but I mean, that's sort of the way it is. And we really don't specifically address that. There's no aesthetics in here. So, but yes, I think it's pretty important that you be an arborist. And this also allows, actually, the city manager can appoint either a city employer. They can also hire an outside company to perform the duties of this too, if the city ever downsized or did whatever. So I would assume that the city manager and whoever on into the future would make reasonable judgments on who he had to enforce this and get the best person that he could. So,
Good to assume, though, is it?
yes.
I'm done.
Okay.
I have a comment. Overall, I do think the flexibility that this provides is the right thing because it's not one size fits all. It's not 2 always should replace 1 in the various situations. But I also very much like the recommendation that David made, and Carrie also, agreed that given the fact that if we are given some leeway to developers to plant less, and we are removing a significant portion of some of the beautiful canopy that we have in Littleton in certain areas, that we should attempt to allow for the creation of that, or to save that in some way in other areas, or to provide beauty in other areas. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm leaning towards either, I think it's a tabling this and asking city staff to come up with some recommended language on what that could look like, as opposed to making it, maybe it's making it conditional on the development of that language, but I'll look to council to guide us on the right process there.
I have a few comments. I've encountered similar dilemmas through design review where there just wasn't enough room to put trees in the development. Sorry you're sitting down because I have questions for you. You stated that when somebody comes in with a development, you work with them in lieu of having standards of for so many square feet of open space, you have to have so many trees and so many shrubs. We don't have those standards. You know, 1 tree per 300 square feet or whatever. We don't have that, right?
That's correct.
But you work with the developer or applicant to come up with an acceptable landscape plan.
Yes.
For every development. Has there been any complaints over the years that the landscape plans in our city are inadequate?
I've never received any. Usually in my comments, in most cases, they're pretty good about putting the correct quantities of trees. Mm-hmm. Over especially the last 5 years, essentially my comments usually relate to making sure the trees have enough room to grow, enough root volume, mm-hmm. that they have enough diversity in the trees, which is even more important in the face of emerald ash borer. And most of my comments, actually, I have them decrease the number of shrubs that they propose.
Right.
Because they have a tendency to cram them in there where it's not healthy. But no, I can't remember ever getting a comment that...
So we're not getting calls, that such and such a development looks sparse and there's not enough trees or not enough shrubs or too much concrete. And, well, we probably get that. But when this ordinance was in place, could the trees that went towards replacing the ones removed apply to the 1 per 40 on frontage? Or
Yes.
So they're being put in somewhere.
Correct.
Whether it's on the street front, the
And
road
always,
frontage.
or not always, usually many more trees than were required to be put in.
Right.
So if you take out 4 big mature trees and your landscape plan shows 20, and I would say, okay, we need to add a tree here and add a tree here, you end up with 22 trees.
Right.
That's the way that it works out. And usually until they get the cost estimates, we never really hear much from the developers. And then usually sometimes they try to sort of value engineer, mm-hmm. in which case we said, if that was a good plan before, we think it's a good plan now.
Right. That was already answered. So thank you. That's all I have for you at this time. As far as understanding what we're voting on, I think the issue was not understanding the language or the paragraph. I think the question that, at least for me, was we had a lot more pages. Which of these pages were we actually voting on, and what specific paragraph were we voting on? It wasn't that we weren't informed as to the actual ordinance, because we had this ordinance a few days ago, and we all had an opportunity as board members to review it and come prepared. I believe this ordinance was also out there, correct me if I'm wrong, when it was scheduled for February 21st?
We did schedule it for the 24th, but we found that there were other changes, so no, we did not put it out when we canceled that meeting on the 24th.
I am a strong believer in giving the public opportunity to see whatever's being considered by the board as early as possible, and sometimes the board doesn't get a staff report until the Friday before our public hearing. So I would encourage staff always to try to get it to us as soon as possible, and for it to be posted to the public as soon as possible. And I think that might be a discussion in future meetings about how best to give everyone ample opportunity to review an ordinance or an application.
And we are advisory to City Council on this matter, and in most matters, just as the public is advisory, they have their chance during council hearings. They will have a chance to talk about this. So we're advisory. Citizens are advisory. We get our information typically the Friday before the hearing, so we have to scramble and understand it before Monday. It's the way it is.
Right. So my last comment, then we can have a motion if we want to go there. I don't think changing the language necessarily diminishes at all the city's ability to enforce or encourage or implement quality landscape plans. The fact that they're already required to do 1 per 40 street frontage requirement. I don't know of any other city that has an ordinance like this. I haven't encountered it, at least. Are there other cities that do this that we know of, or?
In some of the cities I work for typically will have a street tree frontage requirement.
But I mean an existing tree replacement plan.
No.
Okay. And as far as requiring developers to bank trees, that's an impact fee. We can do that if we want to talk about it. But I think, in my opinion, the landscape architect, arborist, has done a wonderful job of working with developers, encouraging them to do quality landscape plans, and the city looks great because of it. And so I think that'll continue even with whatever if this happens to go through. So that's all I have to say. And unless somebody has anything to say, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the resolution recommending that council approve Section 4 of the attached ordinance, amending the zoning code regarding the landscape design standards for the replacement of trees.
Second.
Do we have a discussion?
I think we've had the benefit of good negotiations because there was a need to negotiate because it was required that for every tree removed needed to be replaced, or however it was written. We lose that negotiating power by removing that now. So I think that has worked to our advantage in the past to allow us to use what they couldn't plant on the property in other surrounding areas. I'm still very much an advocate of further changing some of this language, and I'm asking for the city to consider adding language to allow for either a funding mechanism, meaning funding be set aside, or set number of trees be considered in other parts of the city limits.
Are you wanting to amend the motion?
I'm wanting the city to propose language around that. I'm not prepared to give language on that front.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion on the table?
Yeah, I'm with Karina. I think that it is a tremendous negotiating tactic. I had thought initially that allowing a developer to maybe substitute shrubs for trees might be a good idea, but after hearing Dave talk and understanding that the trees are so important and they're there for much longer, that it is important to have trees, and it is important, especially in this day and age with decreasing greenery, not just in Littleton but elsewhere as well, to maintain that. And whether you maintain it on that site or maintain it elsewhere, I don't think it's if there's 40 trees, or if there's 20 trees on a site and they have to put 40 but they can only put 25, a tree isn't that expensive that they couldn't plant them elsewhere, or arrange for maybe even some other. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see some language to that effect that maintains our negotiation power and also maintains the quality. And I think especially since you're getting rid of the arborist designation here, there's a chance that the city manager will take over that job and not do a good job. I mean, there's a chance that he, more than likely he'll hire an outside firm or have a arborist on staff, but someone down the road, with city cuts in the future, who knows how that'll play out. So.
I don't hear an amendment here. I just hear a recommendation. Is that correct?
I believe that's
Okay.
true. Any other discussion? Let's cast our vote.
Green button.
The ordinance passes. Five yeses and 2 noes. Okay, the next item is considered general business. So, Jan, this is a Littleton Village subdivision preliminary plat, 7400 South Broadway.
Is Bob Deeds going to be here for this?
No, but the applicant's civil engineer is here. Actually, both civil engineers. They have a civil engineer that's doing the on-site infrastructure design and the off-site infrastructure design. So.
Wouldn't it have been nice to have included the city engineer to discuss drainage issues?
Well, that's not my.
Okay.
And Jan, are you going to explain under the category general business, is this a vote or just a?
This is a vote by you. It's not a public hearing. The public hearing was dealt with at the zoning stage when the uses and the densities were determined for the property. So the preliminary plat is held by is considered by the planning board at a public meeting. Like I said, it's not a public hearing that's been posted and all that sort of thing. But it is a vote by you because the code does require that a preliminary plat be reviewed and approved by the planning board. The next step after the preliminary plat is a final plat review, and that then goes on to city council for final approval.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Tonight, the owner of the property, which is WIP Littleton Village LLC, is proposing to subdivide this property at 7400 South Broadway. This was formerly known as the Marathon site, located at the northeast corner of South Broadway and Dry Creek Road. The property is approximately 77 acres. The east half of the site is zoned PDR, Plan Development Residential, and the west half is zoned PDC Commercial. In March 2006, City Council approved the Littleton Village Plan Development Plan for this site with, as I mentioned before, mixed-use development, which was 250,000 square feet of commercial and 412 residential units on the westerly side. On the easterly side, residential zoning was approved for a maximum of 488 units. And the total for development on the property is 250,000 square feet of commercial and 900 dwelling units. Recently, in August of 2013, you all reviewed and made recommendations to the council, and council then approved an amendment to the plan development plan, which reconfigured the streets and some of the land use parcels. It realigned the rather crooked zone boundary line between the planned development residential and the commercial. That resulted in moving about 7.7 acres from the PDR to the PDC. That resulted in moving 2 multifamily parcels from the PDR to the PDC. There was a density increase in the planned development commercial and then a decrease in the planned development residential. And the Central Park, which is proposed in the middle of the property, was reconfigured. Still, there was no change to the maximum allowable development on the property. As I mentioned before, the approved PD plan establishes the allowed uses, the maximum density, and the building heights, and minimum building setbacks, and amount of unobstructed open space. That was, of course, all considered under the zoning and at the previous public hearing. The proposal before you tonight, as I mentioned, is the preliminary subdivision plat, which is the second step in the development process. The purpose of platting is to establish lots, easements, and street alignments. Technical issues such as drainage, grading, utilities, landscaping, and street improvements are dealt with during the platting process. What's before you tonight is a preliminary plat. The final detailed plans are developed after the preliminary plat approval, but prior to final plat submission to the City Council. And as I stated, the final plat and the subdivision improvement agreement are approved by City Council. The preliminary plat depicts the same street layout as was shown on the PD plan and amended in August. The private street intersecting Broadway, about midpoint on the property frontage, accesses into the commercial area with a Main Street type of access. Starts with a median and then it expands into a Main Street type with diagonal parking and inline storefronts on both sides of this street. This is called proposed to be called Village Drive. This then intersects, as you can see, with the north-south street that's called Sherman Street, and that provides storefront access to larger retail commercial along these 2 parcels along there. The existing signal on Broadway and Fremont will remain, and Fremont's the northerly street off of Broadway, and that provides access both into the commercial mixed-use area and then further east to the residential areas. And there are 4 proposed access points along West Dry Creek Road, one movement into the commercial. There's another cut that's intended to be, I think, a service drive later when the final site plans are developed. And then there's 2 other access points off of Dry Creek into the residential area to the east. And just to kind of further explain the plat a little bit, it's, as you see, these are big lots and blocks and street layouts. And this first filing, this first plat going through is to establish those larger super lots with the infrastructure and the streets layout. On the commercial side and the multifamily parcels there, the next step after the final plat for those will be site development plans, and that's when they'll come in to the city review for those specific detailed plans that lay out the parking, the buildings, landscaping, all that we look for in there. On your plat, you'll see that there's big super lots in the east side on the residential area, and the intention there is that those blocks will be purchased by home builders that will come in later with site development plans and most likely replats to fit the product that they're proposing, which will be, probably some attached single-family patio homes. There could be some alley-loaded type product. There could just be single-family detached product. So those are just being planted as super blocks now to get the infrastructure in, and then there'll be further detailed plans when builders actually do buy those pieces. A metropolitan district has been established for Littleton Village, and their service plan was accepted by the council in 2013. And this district will be responsible for funding the infrastructure to be installed, and then will provide perpetual maintenance of the private drainage, detention facilities, on-site sanitary sewer mains, landscaping and open space improvements, and private streets and other privately held common facilities which won't be maintained by the city. And the issue with the Central Park, we're still discussing this with South Suburban. They've shown some interest in possibly owning and maintaining that park. That hasn't been finally decided, but if it's not South Suburban, it will be the Metropolitan District that owns and maintains it for the use of the public out in that development. And this is just the conceptual colored site plan that was included with the PD plan, just to kind of show you, a possible layout per the lot layout and street layout you just saw on the plat. With I think you saw this at the zoning stage hearing, with the pink buildings being the commercial inline Main Street retail type shops, and then those yellow buildings being the larger scaled commercial retail, and then those and some mixed use behind there, and then the tan buildings being the multifamily area around the Central Park, with everything on the east side being the residential side. The development of this property does include widening and making improvements to South Broadway and Dry Creek Road. Broadway will be widened to provide for continuous right turn lanes from Dry Creek Road to Village Park Drive to accommodate traffic entering and exiting the site. Probably should go back one. I don't know if you can see that really well. This little plat doesn't go onto the PowerPoint too clearly. And then this access, that's Village Park Drive, coming into the site, will be restricted to right in, right out only. In addition, there will be 2 left turn lanes for southbound traffic provided at the Dry Creek intersection from Broadway. And Dry Creek Road will be widened to provide 2 additional lanes for a total of 5 lanes, 2 eastbound, 2 westbound, and 1 center lane for left turning traffic up to the intersection of Dry Creek and Broadway. And then at the intersection, Dry Creek will be widened to 6 lanes, 2 eastbound, 1 westbound through lane, 1 westbound right turn lane, and 2 westbound left turn lanes.
Jan, sorry. Can you just show me that with like red markers, or can you point to? I'm having a hard time seeing 6 lanes and 5 lanes.
I can't do it on there.
You can't do that.
So is it, so down here?
Can I just go up there and point?
Yeah, or even down here, yeah. See what I mean? It's hard to see. If you could show me Dry Creek and Broadway, because I couldn't. Okay. Right. So, and of course, this Fremont is still here with the line. Okay. And then going to left turn lanes, constructed on Broadway, there'll be 3 northbound, 2 southbound on Broadway. Left turn lanes on Broadway. So,
Where did,
you have to call it something else.
where did you say was
Maybe
the?
use the overhead, perhaps would be a,
Where did you say was the right in, right out? Is that Sherman on Dry Creek?
Broadway.
What's it?
Broadway.
It's off of Broadway? I just don't see it here.
Stop you, here's the medians.
Right.
Stop you unless you got some signage.
Yeah.
It's going to be the new Village
Even
Park
now.
Drive, right in, right out.
No, that, oh, right. Because then the traffic lights at Sherman up on top, right?
Eye out there, yeah.
Yeah, right.
At the
Yeah,
top.
okay, then there's the
Fremont.
road that's
Can you
up
make
here.
that
It's like
bigger?
Fremont, right.
Okay.
Oh, you're looking at Nibby's.
Now we're just gonna go to the,
Now,
yeah, this is a better signalized, right? Okay.
Dry Creek, that's a right turn.
you can see the little arrows or not, but, okay. On East Dry Creek Road,
cannot
you know,
turn
back
this
here at
way.
Logan Street, you'll have 2 lanes going westbound, I'm sorry. And then as you get closer to here, where you have some access points here on the south side, those will increase to 4 lanes. You'll have a right turn continuous lane here that will turn onto Broadway. You'll have 1 westbound through lane that goes through the intersection for Dry Creek Road. And then you'll have 2 left turn lanes coming up to the intersection here on Dry Creek Road. Going eastbound, you'll have a right turn lane here to access these businesses on the south side of the road that exist now. And then also 2 through lanes that go along East Dry Creek Road. And then on Broadway, you'll have this right turn lane going northbound on South Broadway. You'll have the 2 through lanes going northbound on Broadway. And then you'll have there'll be a median that gets extended down south on Broadway to restrict the movements on the entrance in to right in, right out only. There'll be these 2 left turn bays constructed here on South Broadway to provide 2 left turning movements into Dry Creek Road. So, is that better? Okay.
From Dry Creek, can they turn left on Sherman?
Creek, can they turn left?
Doesn't look like there's a.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's a full movement. Yeah, that's a full movement there. And that goes into both the commercial and the residential area.
Do you know, and this probably doesn't really have any bearing, but there's a gas station on the corner, southeast corner of Dry Creek and Broadway?
Right.
And there's an exit entrance that comes out at Dry Creek on the north side. Will that median on Dry Creek prevent people from turning left into that very short distance between that driveway and the light?
This one right here?
Yeah.
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 Yes.
Okay.
That's correct, right.
I just think that's an additional danger. That doesn't really have anything to do with this property, but.
The
It's a
gas
double
station
yellow
won't be
line
cut
now.
off by the median.
Nobody's supposed to turn there now because it's a double yellow.
Yeah.
And so this will stop people, because go by there every day, and it's
Yeah,
almost
I
see
use that
accidents
gas
there.
station. It amazes me, people just zipping out around that corner.
Both ways, coming in and coming out.
Yeah, yeah.
At your own risk, It's like,
It's one of the cheaper gas stations around, too, so there's a lot of people usually
Don't want
there.
to give their name.
You have an interest in the company?
Jan, you do
Well,
have,
just, it's crowded is all.
Jan, you have arrows, those third set of arrows. Would that suggest that you could turn into those businesses? I don't even know what's down here.
well, this is a left turn cue for the intersection here.
It's just,
Turn lane.
okay.
According to the plan, the gas station access is still open. The median doesn't go down that far. The median stops right at that car dealership's entry.
That's correct, yeah. The gas station is down here, yeah.
This is the gas station entry. I'm looking at the drainage map, actually, but
I think they
zoomed
could.
in on that corner.
I do.
If they cut off that gas station, that would really make an impact on the gas station.
I think they need to.
Well, I think that's
It'll be signed that's a no left turn, and then the double yellow stripe as well, like it is today.
But that won't stop anybody.
With that much traffic and another 900 units over there, I think it needs to be a median.
Is that because there's no room to run a median all the way down? Yeah. It looks like that corner's already being taken. Well, finish your presentation, then we'll...
okay. Can you switch back to the computer? Okay. Continuing on, the street sections that are shown on the preliminary plat on site have been modified somewhat from the sections shown on the PD plan due to utilities and finalized design, engineering design. The language on the PD plan does allow for some modifications during the platting process in order to address final alignments and utility designs. I had included in your packet this little comparison chart to hopefully kind of simplify down what the little changes are. And I will kind of briefly go over those here, if you can see that at all. The Village Park Drive, the portion that enters in right off of Broadway, this road had to accommodate a 30-foot wide exclusive Denver Water Board easement, and that was the reason for the pavement width to have to increase on that on those roadways. So the Village Park Drive roadway from flow line to flow line increased from 44 feet to 50 feet. And then the tree lawn had to be adjusted to accommodate into that right-of-way. So the left tree lawn was reduced from 23 feet to 15 feet. And the east tree lawn was increased from 9 feet to 13 feet. The sidewalk width stayed the same at 6 feet. And then the portion of Village Park Drive, which does not have the median in it, it's the portion that's got the diagonal parking on that. The flow line to flow line width on that had to be increased from 61 feet to 71 feet. And then there are no tree lawns on that section because it's the storefronts with the tree grates. The sidewalks then were reduced from 14.5 feet on each side to 9.5 feet on each side. And then the Sherman Street, which is that north-south street that fronts the larger box retail, it wasn't centered on the PD plan, so they readjusted that to centerline the street, and that. And they also evened up the right-of-way width, so it went from 59 feet to 60 feet. And then they adjusted the tree lawns to 8 feet and 6 feet. That reduced the easterly tree lawn from 8 feet to 6 feet. And then they adjusted the sidewalk widths accordingly by increasing the westerly sidewalk from 5 feet to 8 feet, and it left the easterly sidewalk at 5 feet. So they made those adjustments there. And oh, I'm sorry, that's Sherman Street. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong line here. Sherman Street, the north-south street there in the commercial area, they centered lined that street, and all that happened there was the flow line stayed the same, but the tree lawns and sidewalk on each side got adjusted to 12 3/4 feet. It was decreased a couple feet on each side. And then the Fremont Street that's east of Logan, that's in the residential area, is where the tree lawn and the sidewalks were adjusted a couple of feet to centerline that street, and then and even that to a 60-foot wide flow line to flow line width, or right away. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, staff evaluated those, and the Public Works Department did, and felt that these proposed street sections meet the overall intent of the PD plan. The storm drainage, I'll describe that a little bit. The topography of the site is, I can't point on that, so I think I'm going to go back to this. We'll just go back to the old-fashioned way here. Okay, well, this isn't right sheet. Roughly, the topography of the site is such that there's a ridge line on the site that roughly goes about like this, and it's divided into two drainage basins. So there's the flows that go to the northeast basin of the site, drain northeasterly, and basically sheet flow north and east into the Centennial subdivisions. And then there's a smaller basin on the south side of the site that drains this direction to the storm sewer inlet in Broadway that carries on down to Lee Gulch. In order to direct the stormwaters away from the Centennial neighborhoods, the site will be, the grades of the site will be elevated about 10 to 15 feet at the northeast corner so that the property tilts and will drain the water to the west. There'll be a series of detention ponds in that north boundary park, they called it, which is a buffer area to Centennial, and it also provides these detention ponds that will direct the water westerly and detain it and release it at historic flows. A previous storm drainage concept was to actually direct that into a storm sewer that would be installed in Broadway and extended about 3,200 feet north up to Littles Creek and go under the Highline Canal. That proposal's been modified so that they actually will be taking those flows, running them along that north property line with the detention ponds, and then going into a pipe that's constructed on the property and go southwards along Broadway to this detention pond that will be constructed in the southeast corner to accommodate the flows coming off of the south basin. And both of those, the flows from that detention pond and the ones coming from the north detention ponds, will then be intercepted into an outlet, a stormfall, an outlet in South Broadway to that existing storm sewer, and then conveyed onto Lee Gulch. And that will eliminate the need for basically disrupting Broadway for a number of months. And also putting the pipe under the Highline Canal is a bit tricky as well. So infrastructure-wise and disruption-wise to the community, they felt this solution to draining the site to Lee Gulch was the best. And I know that was of some controversy several years ago when the I think the first zoning that came in, which was the Lowe's big box. And the engineer that's here tonight, they had prepared a drainage study and submitted it to city engineering to review that evaluated this proposal that's before you tonight and concluded that the controlled releases of the stormwater from the network of these detention ponds will be close to or below existing flows that are currently being released from the existing site, and therefore will have no increased impact on the flows or stability issues within Lee Gulch. And I'm not a drainage engineer, so I can't answer those technical questions, but there's two of them here tonight from the applicants that I'm sure can answer some of your technical questions on that. And then just to follow up, the staff had reviewed the preliminary plat and have recommended approval. We found that this meets the intent in the general PD plan, the subdivision regulations, and the other city code, and recommend approval. And I'll be happy to answer some questions for you. And the applicant has their engineers here tonight.
Thank you, Jen. So I open it up to the board for questions.
Jan, I have a question. I have several questions. So just to confirm what we're, again, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So the platting, so actually the map you just had on there, one of the things that we're approving is essentially those square boxes. We broke up what were big spaces into smaller square boxes. Is that where one thing?
Let me pull that out and get that page again for you.
Development parcels.
Thank you for the proper.
Right. Yeah, so these are actually rather large lots and blocks, and this tonight demonstrates the infrastructure layout with the streets and the sewers and these larger lots. And the final plat will look just like this as well. And the next stage in development for several of these parcels, these big parcels, which are the commercial, these are the two multifamily pieces, these are the two commercial mixed-use pieces, they most likely will go through a site plan stage. They probably won't necessarily be required to go through replatting because they're usually a typical single ownership, and then they do the site development plans for those uses. This area over here, which is the residential area, it's envisioned that these big lots will be purchased by individual home builders, and they will come back through most likely with replatting to create those individual lots for the townhomes, the patio homes, the single-family homes.
This is
whatever.
kind of the first step to start breaking it
Right,
up.
right.
Okay.
And this establishes the layout for the infrastructure and for those builders, and then that will get installed by the Metro District, and then individual builders will come in with their plats and their site plans and their little, driveways and whatever.
The second thing that we're approving tonight is a change in the drainage recommendation.
Right. The drainage concept on the zoning plan was looking at draining the north half of this property further north up to Little's Creek.
Which by approving or by voting on that, we are also therefore addressing the change and impact that it has on the tree lawn and the sidewalk easements.
Right, those modifications, okay. Yes. Okay. And then the PD plan does allow for some of those modifications at final design. And like I said, staff reviewed those and felt that they still meet the intent of the PD plan. They weren't significant and they were reasonable given the utility layout and design and all. So that's part of the preliminary plat. And then that will be carried forward in the construction plans at the final plat stage.
else?
And the applicant isn't making a presentation,
Mark,
but they're here for
anyone?
questions.
I'll save my
Okay.
drainage questions for after the applicant has spoken.
Oh, I was just going to say, they're not actually making a formal presentation,
Ah.
but they're here to answer questions, yeah.
Ah, well, then,
So I think now we do our questions unless
Here we go.
somebody has a motion.
well, back in the good old days of Lowe's, when they first proposed, 2005, 2004, whatever, there was, of course, the solution was to take quite a bit of the water from the site up north, the 3,200 feet to Little's Creek, which is, I do agree, it's going to really have quite an impact on Broadway for a number of months. But that was the solution. Some water was going south of Lee, but there was neighborhood concerned about lots more water ending up in Lee Gulch. That was then, and now we have a proposal where magically the line has disappeared going north. All the water is going south. So I guess my question to you is, what changed? Where's all that? All the water is going south now, which brings up the concerns of citizens way back when. Are you retaining more water on the site and releasing it slower? That to me is probably the only way you can pull this off.
I have to get the...
Let's hear from the civil engineer. And while you're explain how we are allowed to cross basins.
Okay. Real quickly, my name is Pat Horn. I'm with Martin Engineering. We're the civil engineer for the offsite, as Jan explained. There's two engineering groups. My firm's doing the offsite, and that kind of goes back to previous developments and timing. They felt it was better to have two, and now that it's got redeveloped again and the process has started, we've stayed teamed. Jamie, I'll let you.
And I'm Jamie Overgaard with the Lund Partnership, and we're doing the civil engineering for the on-site. And as Pat said, we're teamed up to work together. And what I thought I'd do is real quickly just explain one more time about the on-site drainage, then Pat will pick it up as it leaves the site and explain and actually answer your question. As our site was presented to you guys back in August, I believe, or last summer, our site still drains exactly the same way it was going to originally. The bulk of the site, this area right here, still drains north to our water quality / detention ponds up at the north. And then that's about 60 acres that still drains up to that area. And then we have about 15 acres that does drain to the southwest corner of the site. This area right here that drains to the southwest corner. And what we're going to do is we're collecting all the drainage in the pond at the north, and then we're going to actually convey it in a pipe that runs along Broadway. Pipes actually on our site along Broadway, and then it comes to the south. And at the corner, our pond at the southwest corner also ties into that pipe, and then from there it leaves our site and goes into Broadway, and that's where Pat picks it up.
And I'll back up a little bit on some of the history, if I may, Jamie. Again, you're correct. The previous presentations had an outfall going to the north in Broadway to Little's Creek. And actually, at the suggestion of Urban Drainage and the city, there's been additional flooding in Little's Creek. There's conveyance issues to the north. While Lee Gulch to the south doesn't have the flooding issues, but it has more of an erosion concern. And so since the 2004 Lowe's development, the city, along with Urban Drainage, commissioned a study for those erosion issues on Lee Gulch. In 2008, C.H. Truman Hill did a study to do what they could to stabilize it. It wasn't a conveyance. The flood flows could go, but it was more the minor flows were causing erosion and degradation of the channel. And some of those improvements have been actually implemented over time to this date. And so those issues are being addressed. So because of those two things, flooding concerns in Little's, erosion concerns in Lee that have been addressed, that's primarily what's changed. They felt that it was better to take the flows to where there was conveyance capacity to the south, and those erosion issues are being addressed, versus taking all this to the north, where there's still conveyance issues, several houses in the floodplain, adding more flows to those issues. So that's one of the primary things that have changed since the previous development proposals. And then in addition to that, Jamie's firm, with this additional detention, is increasing the detention volume from what was previously proposed. So there is more water being stored, released slower, so that those combinations of conditions that have changed is why we're here now presenting this different concept to take the flows to the south.
From the 2004 proposal, which included Lowe's, to today's proposal, was there back then, was there more impervious surface back then with the big box and Cloneville homes?
Possibly. I wasn't personally involved, and to be honest with you, I've not studied that in detail for that comparison. I do know that this one is slightly smaller than obviously a large box parking lot, sea of parking lot, combination of parks and residential usage. So I would assume that's the case, but I don't know that's a fact that's changed as well.
So since we're not hydrologists either up here, I don't think, so you have more retainage on site, releasing no more than historic flows into Lee Gulch is how you're pulling this off.
Correct. And then, again, the change in the conditions of Lee Gulch, that it's been stabilized or is in the process of being stabilized. It was felt that that was a better solution for the flows than adding it to Little's to the north.
And since Bob's not here, staff, Bob Deeds, obviously, and city staff, city engineers have looked at this and let's put it enthusiastically approve of the change. Yeah, seal, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So did you get approval to put water in another basin? Or who approves that?
It's actually it's a regional concern, so it does go through the urban drainage process. Again, it's in their mind a safety issue, and dealing with urban drainage directly, they feel that this redirection, while it is a basin adjustment, it's not significant enough to have any other ramifications other than just improve the local drainage improvements.
Donna.
I just wanted to ask, there was a mention that the site was raised up 10 feet on the east parcel. Was that part of the previous discussion, or is that new?
It's always been that graded. Yeah, we have to what we do is we're kind of lifting it up and flattening it out onto the north. So as it flows to the north side is lifted up. And actually, it's not tilted so much as going from east to west, other than we're collecting it. I mean, it barely tilts a little bit. But Jan's right. We raised that northeast corner about 10 feet. And you can kind of tell by the contours. I don't know how to read the contours, but.
And that's adjacent to the residential,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that part of.
It'll be 10 feet higher. And that's been our plan since 2006.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I actually have more questions for Jan. Jan, I had a hard time following the impacts of this change.
Okay.
So if you can take me through the, at least on screen, I think it's slide 19 of what is changing. So what I'm hearing is the paved area has been widened to create 30 feet for Denver water easement, reducing tree lawn width. So the tree lawn width went from what to what?
Let me go through that with you.
And which map are you on? Just so I have the same one. Oh, I think I have it.
This is Village Park Drive coming in off of Broadway. Excuse me.
Village Park Drive, yeah.
It's, okay, there's a median there. And that part, the right-of-way is 90 feet. That's what it was on the zoning, and it still remains 90 feet wide from here to here. That's from this sidewalk, edge of this sidewalk to this sidewalk. The 30-foot wide water line goes down the center of it, so that required the pavement, the actual pavement width, widths to increase because Denver Water Board requires pavement. So the flow line to flow line width, which is from this gutter to this gutter, that increased from 44 feet to 50 feet. And then on this side of the street, the tree lawn was 23 feet from here to here on the PD plan, and now the plat is proposing this to be 15 feet, so that's reduced by 7 feet. And then on this side of the street, the tree lawn was 9 feet on the PD plan, and it's been increased to 13 feet. So they had to widen the paved area within the right-of-way to accommodate the Denver water line. And then what they did is they readjusted the tree lawn widths to be able to keep all those improvements within the 90-foot right-of-way. And then they did the same. They had to do the same thing as that street continues. This portion of Village Park Drive street cross-section represents the portion that's directly accessing the inline shops. There's no median there. It's got the diagonal parking on each side facing what will be the storefronts. And that's also a 90-foot right-of-way width. They had to increase the pavement width, which goes from this gutter to this gutter, from 61 feet to 71 feet. And then in order to adjust the section to still meet the 90-foot right-of-way, they modified there is no tree lawns on this one. These are actually tree grates in the sidewalk because of the storefronts. So they ended up decreasing the sidewalk widths from 14.5 feet to 9.5 feet. So they reduced each sidewalk 5 feet to be able to accommodate the wider pavement width and these two walkways within the same 90-foot right-of-way. And then Sherman Street is the private street that goes north-south that intersects Village Drive here. And what they did with this street is it wasn't center-lined on the PD plan, so they readjusted this to center it. And by doing so, it didn't require any increased width in the paved area, but to centerline it, they had to adjust the landscape island or tree lawn that would be existing on this side, and this is the sidewalk on the east side, and there would be storefronts here, and this would basically be parking lot on this side. So they adjusted those from, they made them both 12 3/4 feet wide, which actually ended up increasing this tree lawn by a couple of feet and decreasing this sidewalk by a few feet.
So have we looked at, because again, the whole purpose of this village is that it's walkable, you can ride your bike, it feels safe. I assume the speed of traffic is going to be extremely slow there. Do we feel, or how do we feel confident that we have reduced those areas that people are going to either be walking or riding their bikes on are still safe and a comfortable environment to do that?
I think we believe that. I mean, the sidewalks are still fairly wide in these portions, and they're still meeting in, they're still wider than they're 6 feet or wider in the other portions and separated with a fairly decent tree lawn. So, I mean, we still felt that they meant that intent of the pedestrian walkability, in addition to working in with the utility easements.
Okay.
To follow up on Karina's comment, Village Park Drive B, that street has the storefront?
Right. That would have the storefronts and then the diagonal parking in front of them.
So is that Village Park Drive west of Sherman and then east of Sherman? Is that the difference
It's
between?
west of Sherman.
Is that the difference between B and B1?
No, B1 is just the entry. It's a median divided
Okay.
entry, yeah. And then, and there's a couple of pad sites on either side of that. And then after you get past the median, you get into the,
So B is really the retail
right, it's
frontage.
where the retail frontage is, yes.
So my concern, along with Karina's, if you build your storefront, zero lot line on the tract line, correct? Your storefront building can go right to that line as your right-of-way. Correct? That leaves 9 foot 6 inches to the curb. And in my experience, you want what they had before, 14 and a half or 15. That's what South Glen has, that's what Stapleton has, just for that pedestrian ease of walking and having tree lawns and furniture and trash cans. And so they've taken away 5 feet, which in essence is the tree grate. And so it concerns me that it's now only 9 foot 6, and that street experience is going to be tighter and a little more congested. And that's kind of the signature of this kind of environment.
Does that affect the ability, again, what triggered that comment also, Randy, for me is restaurants that want to put, tables outside, et cetera. We've significantly limited that, given that actually was one of the intents of the parts of the street. So can we, I heard you answer, yes, we feel it's fine, but I'm also hearing in other places it's different. So how do we?
I understand your concerns. I don't know if that's something you can address to the those.
I can't say if they can commit to widening them. I mean, it's possible that they could offset the buildings and not be right on the property line, but it is up to a zero setback.
Right. That's the way it is right now. Right. And we can't, unless we change the development standards, we can't make them push it back.
Could you come up and speak?
Jamie said that they'll come in and do site development plan review for those buildings when they come in.
And if it's, the city decides that they need to have more of a setback at that time during the review process of the site plan, the city could require them to offset those buildings.
That affects that particular business. We're saying to the business, sorry, you have to make yourself smaller if you want to have more space on the sidewalk because there's less space to be had.
See, a tree grate can be 4 feet wide off the back of curb. So you put that tree grate in there, which basically takes that out of the walking corridor. All you have left is a 5'6" walking corridor next to the building, and that's less than the neighborhood has.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
The architect, our landscape architect always tells us that, you're right, the tree grate can set right up at the back of curb. And then if it's a 5x5 tree grate, the tree sits right in the middle of it, so that's 2.5 feet. And what they like to do is they like to have people actually walk on the tree grates, and they're pedestrian tree grates. So technically you have from 2.5 feet where the tree is to the building face. So you have more like 6 feet, basically. And so you consider part of that tree grate as your walking surface.
When the tree gets big enough to walk under it.
Right.
When it's young, the branches are in your face. So it has to grow first. So I agree with you.
I'm sure.
But you try.
What is downtown? What's the width of the downtown?
I think they're about 6 to 8 feet.
Near the tavern, where the tavern has their seating out, if that seating wasn't there,
No.
that's 10, 12 feet, isn't it?
That's on their property, though.
That's on their property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It extends
But
out
that
into the
sidewalk
right of
goes-
way, but it's in some of it's on in the property as well.
Downtown, you're talking about downtown Littleton?
Yeah, downtown Littleton,
Yeah.
that sidewalk that goes east from the tavern is more than 6 or 8 feet.
And I think it's just, again, it's something that we should try to create more opportunities for that, because that's what creates a vibrant area, whether it's downtown, whether it's the village, whether it's something else.
I think it changes the whole look and feel of that walkable area and changes what mix of businesses you'll have take over that space.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion?
I guess I have a question first, Jan, if I can. How can we assure that those sidewalks would be larger? I mean, you had to make this change because of the city water lines.
Make it a condition?
Other than they,
Well, I think one way would be a recommendation that there be a minimum of, you talk about actual pedestrian way, so if there's a potential, and we want the buildings to come in and out, so if adjacent to the graded tree, there could be a potential of bringing the facade in, so that there would be a minimum travel width of, and I don't know the dimensions like you do. It's what, 9 now with a tree grade at 2.5? So if your recommendation is there be a minimum of
it was 14 and a half.
6 to 8 feet, always clear for pedestrians, that might be one way.
I'm not sure that 6 to 8 feet changes that. If you've got 2.5 for the tree and you've got 9.5 now, that's only 7 feet.
Whatever
already
the
got
dimension
7
would
feet.
be.
I think the question that we're really asking is, how do we get back to 14 feet or a little bit closer to that,
At the other
but still
5.
address, the reasons why we have to make these changes because of drainage? Can that be relooked at? I'm sure it's been looked at 100 times.
5 feet back on the sidewalk.
That could ultimately be your recommendation or your approval, is that be 14
That can
feet.
be a recommendation.
It
add
means
that
the
5
parcel
feet
gets
back
smaller.
on. Yeah.
It does, pushes everything back.
Yeah, 2 feet.
On section B,
Oh,
that the
like the
motion,
retail
or
space.
could be that,
What page number?
That what would?
Well, let's get a motion and then maybe we make an amendment.
Okay, so I think it's,
Karina.
I motion per section 10.3-1 of the city code that the board shall review am I doing the right one? The
No, you did-
preliminary,
yeah.
no?
Just go to,
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, sorry.
One more. All right, strike that. I move the planning board resolution number 14-3 approving the Littleton Village subdivision preliminary plat be approved.
second.
any discussion or amendments?
I don't know how I'd propose it, but I would like to see that we add an amendment that sidewalk be at least 12 feet instead of the 14 that was originally platted, and now we're down to 9.6, if we can add 2.5 feet to it to make it 12 feet. Is that a reasonable?
Make a motion,
For
or make
section-
an amendment.
I would.
For section B,
Yeah, I move that we make that sidewalk at least 12 feet as an amendment to this motion.
I second.
discussion?
Do we have
We
any,
are-
sorry, so I will discuss it. Does anyone have any knowledge of where it has been 12 feet? You made a couple of comments about Stapleton, perhaps.
What about Aspen Grove? Theirs are pretty wide, and they've got,
I mean, how do we know?
Well, just look at
12 is
Aspen
right?
Grove, some of the planters are 10 feet wide.
right.
It allows for that strolling atmosphere along the retail. So 12 is is still small, but it's a lot better than 9.5. Yeah. So there's a motion on the table to approve, well, to amend the original motion requiring Section B of Village Park Drive, private road, to have a minimum sidewalk width of 12 feet?
12 feet.
12 feet from back of curb.
I'd like to make another amendment, or do we vote on this one first? Or
Vote on this one.
okay, so
Okay. Okay, the amendment passes.
so can I do another one?
Yeah.
Motion to amend 10 dash let's see, what's the wording?
-3.
Am I reading the right place? Therefore, the planning board does hereby approve, where am I reading? Sorry, I lost my place.
You got the right.
14-3. Looking for the,
Yeah. And I move that the planning board resolution number 14-3 approving the Littleton Village subdivision preliminary plat be approved and amended to one moment, please. Village Park Drive B resumed back to the 14.5 feet as previously created.
Let's make sure we got this right. We've already approved a 12-foot.
You amend the amendment? That's, I think, what you're asking.
I think so.
So
Does it have to
amended
indicate-
from 12 to be 14.5? That's the statement you want to hear?
Let's see if you get a second before we
Yeah. So
have to answer that.
state your amendment again, please.
I move that the planning board resolution number 14-3 approving the Littleton Village subdivision preliminary plat be approved, be modified from the current 12-foot side motion to 14.5 feet.
Do you have a second? Motion fails, or the amendment fails. We're back to the original motion with the as amended for the 12-foot sidewalk. Any other discussion or amendment? Hearing none, we cast your vote. The motion carries. And that concludes the general business portion. Unless there are staff reports or any other reports, I moved to adjourn. Oh,
I do have.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
items.
thought you were waving me goodbye. Yes, Glenn.
I do want to bring you up to speed on a couple of things. We are gearing up for the study of the mineral station. One of the pre-steps we're taking is we're working with the Urban Land Institute to do a technical advisory panel on the site, which is a bunch of development and planning professionals take a quick look, one-day charrette on what potentially could happen on the mineral site in the RTD land. We have scheduled that for April 22nd. It's actually, we're gearing it up as a joint study session between the City Council and the Planning Board. So, and it will be at the museum. So What will occur is this panel from ULI will take a look for like 36 hours and study the site. They'll recommend potential uses for the property, potentially what the urban design will look at. We've asked that they look at how that RTD site interacts with the adjacent retail and the potential Enzer site on the south of it. There's some traffic impacts that they'll potentially look at as well, and then give you recommendations of things that need to be delved in more deeper when we get into the Dr. Cog funded study, which we will put out as an RFP shortly thereafter. So that's coming up on April 22nd. Make sure you put that on your calendars. There'll probably be interviews with one or more or all of you as a part of that process. Yes, board member.
We've already done a previous Urban Land Institute study of this site. One thing that should be dispersed to everybody on the board.
Yeah, we can do that.
Well beforehand, so we can look at past wisdom. My question is, why are we doing this again? We paid good money back then for the Urban Land Institute to do this. Now I assume we're paying them again to look at the same sites. Has enough changed? I mean, the light rail was in. Aspen Grove was either planned or in place at that time. I can't remember. RTD parking was there. Why are we doing this again?
Well, a couple of reasons. First off, we're sharing the cost with RTD, so it is not totally on the city's dime. RTD has progressed considerably. They are now redeveloping the Alameda station, so they've learned a great deal. Part of it is what would that financial public-private partnership might look like. And there's going to be a renewed emphasis on actually market-supported uses on this site. And I think the previous study didn't do that.
I would agree with the market viability of the previous somewhat pie-in-the-sky
It was,
plan.
and that's good, but we really put the emphasis on what could really happen on this site from a market standpoint.
But we'd still like to get the previous dusted out of the...
That's great. We will get that out to you.
Archives and...
Glenn, is that a regular council time, 6:30 p.m.? That's a Tuesday.
Yes.
So it's 6:30.
Right, it's a Tuesday. Their study session, which starts at 6:30 now, which all their meetings start at 6:30. I don't know if I've made that clear. That was a recent change.
Was that so they could get dinner?
I think it's. I think they're trying to make their meetings not go so late into the evening. So that was part of it.
They need to get to bed early. Is that? They're getting a little.
I'm not going to comment on that. One of the other things I wanted to mention is we have board and commission training on March 27th. Hopefully you can all attend, but I think if you cannot, I think we're allowing you to take the DVD for home study, so you can be homeschooled on it.
I've done it maybe 5 or 6 times. Can I be exempted?
There's no testing out.
No.
What's that? Can't test out.
You can't.
Always new laws.
Okay.
I think it's. I think we're having the same presenter, right, who's really good, and you really, if you can make every effort. I think she really makes what you do kind of come alive, and I think it'll help you down the road. Let's see. I also March 24th. We've got really nothing scheduled. We've got a number of staff. It's spring break, so we are canceling the March 24th meeting. I'd like to thank LaDonna. This is actually her last meeting when we cancel the 24th, so I really appreciate all her effort, and specifically on the comprehensive plan. So one other change regarding minutes.
Who will be our new member?
The council picked R.C. Miles, who has lived here his whole life. He's was a commercial broker, but he's moved more into finance ideas on commercial. I can't explain it as well as he could, but I think he's always wanted to be a part of the board, but because of his duties in marketing properties in the city of Littleton, he always felt there was somewhat of a conflict, but his position has changed a bit. I think he'll be a real asset to the board. So
losing LaDonna and gaining him, we have the same Methodist member of my church, and I know R.C. Miles for many years and served on many committees, building committees, where he is outstanding.
Right, and Ed's going to move up into the number 1 position, and R.C. will be our alternate 2, so. I'm also mentioning minutes. We've taken a look at what we do with minutes, and as you know, your meetings are televised. We spend a whole lot of time on minutes, and you do as well. We have a amendment going to council that basically says our record is that video and audio recording of the meeting. We will provide, and as you can see, Anna's working diligently putting together notes. So if we do have some kind of glitch in our audio system, we can produce minutes, but you will not be seeing formal minutes, hopefully, if council adopts the amendment.
So you're actually eliminating the written minutes, and it's only going to be the audio and video minutes?
Correct.
Why are you choosing to do that?
Really because they're redundant, and they're really not the perfect record. And we spend a lot of money on the audio and video recording, so we're trying to not spend the same amount of money in staff time as well, doing kind of a redundant task.
Here's my opinion. The written minutes are a summarized view of what takes place, some of the key comments that come out, and the video is there for the further context that, of course, you can never type down everything. So I do feel, personally, that does work well for me to feel comfortable to say I approve the meeting of February 24th that lasted for 3 hours and go watch that again. I don't. Looking at a synopsis, I can. I feel more comfortable making that call. Unless I see, and if I see something that maybe I question, then I'll go look at the video. So I don't know that maybe it's something we can work towards, but I wouldn't want to make that change, like we're moving from this to this. And one of the things I did verify, because of the discussion that Pam brought up last time, the minutes were online, the video was online for both the planning board and for city council, so it is available to the public. So I did see that, so that's my thoughts on that.
Are we not going to be approving minutes anymore because of the video, since it's a full record?
So the way we see this happening is that the video will be taken, and then the secretary either to the clerk to the council, or the secretary here to you will certify that the video was a complete and accurate record of the proceedings, that there was, sort of no technical problems with that, and then you will take her certification as approval of the video as.
But we're actually not approving.
You will not have to go and rewatch the hearing. Okay. So all she's going to be certified. Yes, you will not have to go rewatch the hearing.
But you're losing.
Anne will be looking at that to make sure that it recorded the entire time, that you could hear everyone, that speakers were appropriately identified, that it lasted the whole meeting, and basically certifying that it's a full and accurate record of what happened.
That makes me feel
So it'll
better.
be more important to make sure that people address at the microphone.
Absolutely. Everyone needs to be at the microphone. We need speakers to identify themselves. Staff and the board members, they have our names below us on the video. Like right now, it says Chris. Well, he will be put. I bet when you watch
electronically, he'll do it.
Yeah, it'll be electronically on there who's speaking. But when you have, say, engineers come up, we'll need to make sure that they identify themselves and that they're speaking into the microphone. We wouldn't want Jan to run around to the front like she did.
Although, again, I will say the minutes have been used in the past. I've used them looking at former city council meetings to just kind of skim through, see, give further context to maybe some areas that I wasn't clear why maybe someone might have thought or made a comment. Again, I'm not going to view a 3-hour video to do that. Still feel there's some benefits to that. I can appreciate cost reduction. I guess it's, up to the city to decide, but I still see some value to written minutes that are essentially your cliff notes of what you do want to take a look at and maybe delve into deeper.
Yeah, I think not only the cost savings, but we were looking at what is a more exact record, and minutes. If there was something that was incorrect in the minutes and it wasn't caught when you approve it, that is then your official record.
I understand.
And to address your concern about having to watch the whole 3 hours, the video is broken down by agenda item. So while you may have to watch an hour to see the whole discussion on the tree ordinance, you wouldn't have to watch the whole 3 hours of the meeting. So
that would suggest that the agenda has an hour. Agenda about trees started at 1 and ended at 3. Or we'll just have to kind of skim through. All right, we'll figure it out, guys. I missed the meeting, the presenters on the different type of funding. And I went online. I can see the video, but the presentations weren't available online, or I couldn't get them to download. Like some of them actually had presentations that they.
Right.
Do you have those that you can
have those.
distribute?
Sure.
Would you mind sending to me?
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, sir.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Approved.